so what we're going to do right now is we're talking about integers and adding integers. All right, so you guys are going to have some notes that we're going to take, and this is all about adding integers. Okay, now what we just found out is this. When you have these are my cute little circular things. If I have a problem that looks like this right here, where there's 3 greens and 2 greens, we can group all of these together, right? Okay, so what that basically shows us is that when you add positive plus a positive, your answer will end up being a positive result. So 3 plus positive 2 equals a positive 5. Now, if we're on a number line, this is what this would look like if I was on a number line. Okay. Okay, so here's my number line. My first number, and there's so many different ways that you can do number lines for this. I personally like this. Whatever the first number is in your number sentence, you start at that. I like how we don't have to draw another line. We just start at that value. If I did make you start at 0, you would go up to this point because that's plus 3. Okay, right? Now we're going to add positive 2 more. So when you add positive, that means you're still going in the positive direction. So we're going to go up, starting at 3. You're going to go up 1, 2 more, and you're going to land right here. Okay. Now I know you're like, oh, Mrs. Parkin, why are you showing me this number line? Because some people are visual. Some people like to look at that visually. All right. So we know that whenever you add a positive and another positive number together, you will always get a positive result. Okay. Now let's look at the negatives. So these little red guys here, these are negatives. So if I have -4 and a -2, okay, they're all the same color, so I can group them together to get a -6. We can group all of those together. So what we know is when you add a negative to another negative, your answer will continue to be a negative. So if I have -4 plus -3, okay, all I'm going to do is this. Well, I know 4 plus 3 is 7, and they're both negative, so my result is a -7. Okay, now, a lot of people ask this. They're like, Mrs. Parkin, why'd you put parentheses around this second one? And it's because of the fact that too many of you guys will think that that little right there, that little symbol, that is not a subtraction sign, you guys. That is a negative sign. So I want to make sure that I isolate it. I don't have to do it here. I don't have to do it on the first one because of the fact there's no addition sign in front of it. Okay. So if I wanted to draw this out, okay, here is 0. And I guess I probably should have talked about a number line. But so when you start at 0 and go positive, it goes up by 1s. When you start at 0 and go into the dark side, that's right. I call the negative side of the number line the dark side. Okay. All right. You go opposite. So if this is +1, 1 unit below is -1. Okay. -2. And this is the order that a number line goes. Okay. So again, I personally like to start on my number line at the first number given, but really this is 0 plus -4, so it's right here. So that shows a -4. Now we're adding more negatives to this. So if you're adding more negatives, do you go to the dark side or do you turn around and go positive direction? Okay, well, here is what I'm going to share with you. Okay, when you add integers, when adding integers, I want you guys to think about this as money problems. Okay, I don't know what it is, but I will give this problem to my students and they'll be like, I don't know what to do. But as soon as I say to them, you borrow $4 from your mom, you borrow $3 from your dad, how much money have you borrowed? They're like, oh, I borrowed $7. And borrowing is a negative thing on your for your money. So it's just crazy how all of a sudden, if you make it into money, it just makes more sense. So -4 plus -3. I'm adding a -3, so I continue into the dark side. So I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, and I land right there. So that's what -4 plus -3 is. Okay. All right. Now, last but certainly not least, now that we know that when we add the same sign, whenever you add together two integers with the same sign, you just add them. So here's kind of your rule. When adding integers with the same sign, you add the numbers and give it the sign, give the sum the sign of the numbers. Okay, so that is your rule. When you are adding numbers with the same sign, positive plus positive, you basically are going to add the numbers together and you're going to give it whatever those signs are. So since these are both positive, my sum is positive. Since these were both negative, I added 4 and 3. And since they're both negative, my answer's a negative. Okay, so when you add integers, I'll come back to this too in just a second, but let me get through this. All right, now we move on to adding integers with different signs. So basically now we're going to add numbers together that have different signs. So prime example, okay, prime example. If I have 4 and -6, I have 4 plus -6, okay? All right, well, if you think of atoms, all right, atoms in your body or whatever, what happens with atoms is they look for the opposite charge, okay? And so they're like, beep, all right? And then what happens to these is, bam, they disappear. Same with this, they go, the magnetic force, bing, and then they go away, right? So, bing, and they go away. Bing, and they go away, leaving these poor cute little red atoms all by themselves. I know, it's okay. So watch, here we go. If I have a 4 plus -6, 4 plus -6, okay, we just found that my sum of these two numbers was a -2. Okay, well, let's actually look at what this would look like on a number line. On a number line, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -1, -2, -3. Okay, so here's my number line. Okay, so looking at this on a number line, okay, again, I always like to start at the number, but I'll start at 0. The first number is plus +4. So I'm going to start at 0 and I'm going to go up to +4. So this shows +4. Sorry, I know I'm going fast, so I'll slow down a little bit. And remember, I'm going to post this video on Google Classroom, so you can always go back and rewatch it if you need to get the notes. Now I am adding a -6. So I got to figure out what direction to go. Do I keep going in the positive, yay, direction, or do I turn and go in the dark side? Okay, so if you think about this, since it's negative direction is this direction. So I'm going to turn and go into the dark side. 6 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is -6. Okay. All right. So, and it lands on -2 right there. Now, I'm going to stop this really quick. So you missed out on a quick little side discussion that we had, but what we talked about is this number line actually doesn't look like an addition number line. It looks like a subtraction number line, right? Because if I were subtracting 5 minus 3, I'd go up to 5 and then down 3 units. Oops, sorry, should have ended right there. All right, and that's what it looked like. Same thing here. So here's your rule. Your rule when adding integers with different signs, yeah, don't really add them. No. Okay, here's what you do. When adding 2 different sign numbers, you subtract the numbers. Okay, you subtract the numbers, and you always subtract the smaller from the larger. No matter what order they come in, you're always going to subtract the smaller from the larger, no matter what. Then, okay, this is where I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a little bit tricky, but just bear with me. All right, then you are going to give the sum, the answer, you're going to give it the sign of the larger absolute value number. Now you're like, say what, Mrs. Parkin? Absolute, say what? Okay, in a nutshell, basically, you're going to give it the sign of the larger number. Oh. We're in the grade shakeout. Okay, all right, so we give it the sign of the larger absolute value number. And basically, it's a number that's bigger. Now, I know a lot of kids say, well, Mrs. Parkin, 4 is bigger than 6. That's where the absolute value comes in. Because 4 is 4 units from 0. 6 is 6 units away from 0. So 6 actually has a bigger absolute value. So that's why we took the negative. Okay. So if you look at this next problem, if we have 20 plus a -32. So right away, you're scoping this out and you're like, oh, Mrs. Parkin, Mrs. Parkin, I'm adding 2 different sign numbers because one's a positive and one's a negative. So step 1, you don't add them, you subtract them. So it would be 32 minus 20. Notice I subtracted the smaller from the larger, and that comes out to be 12. So that's step 1. Step 2, you give this the sign of the larger number. So you have 20 and you have 32. Ignore the sign. 32 is bigger. And if we go back up, 32 is a negative. So my answer would be a negative 12. Okay. Another example. Let's start with a negative number. Negative 45 plus 57. Okay. Right away, you're looking at this and woo, woo, woo. Oh, Mrs. Parkin, I'm adding two different sign numbers. One's negative, one's positive. I don't add them, I subtract. So step number one, it will be 57 minus 45. Again, notice, I always subtract the smaller from the larger. Doesn't matter what sign they have in front of it. So this comes out to be 12. Oh my gosh, did it really come out to be 12 again? Whoa. Okay, now step two. I have 57 and 45. Well, 57 is bigger than 45, and 57 is positive. So my answer is positive 12. Okay. A sec.